Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIGGRAPH Industry Podcast. My name is John Donaldson, and I'm the Industry Relations Officer. This week, we have Lynch from Gearbox Studios. She's a lighting artist who originally went to A&M, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her path through the industry and what she's doing now. So, Anne, hi, how's it going?
Hi, John. How are you?
Doing great. So, let's talk a little bit about your education and pathway through the industry. Can you give me a little background on what you did in college and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, I went to Texas A&M. I did my undergraduate and graduate school there. And I was actually the first class of visualization students that went through the undergrad program. So we were kind of the guinea pigs, if you will. Um, I ended up founding SIGGRAPH in 2011 with some of my friends. Uh, we had heard about the conference and we wanted to get involved and kind of bring the conference to A&M. And so this is actually really close to my heart, being able to do this, because it's nice to see that it's still operating this, far in the future. Who knew? um, but yeah, I went to the SIGGRAPH conference for 5 years. 4 of those years as a student volunteer. I definitely recommend doing that. It's a great way to get involved and meet people in the industry. I also had the pleasure of presenting twice at the SIGGRAPH dailies. That was a really cool experience. Um, but yeah, that was undergrad, and then I graduated, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went to grad school at A&M. Um, and my original thought was that I would be in the film industry, maybe go to Pixar, DreamWorks, work in advertising. I wasn't really sure. And so I uh, actually went through the majority of grad school um, with that goal in mind. And it wasn't until uh, Andre Thomas came and started um, talks about the gaming industry and what we could do to push students into the gaming industry that I was like, whoa, what is that? I want to learn more about that. And so I think it was 2014. Um, he mentioned Chilenium being an option or an idea, which is a student game jam, and I think that's still in the works
Yes.
today. Awesome. And so I helped him along with some other students start Chilenium, and that really kind of gave me a view into this crazy gaming pipeline. And so I guess I was like 3 years into grad school and had already started my thesis, and I transitioned into gaming because I thought it was honestly more interesting and more kind of like it aligned more with my personal goals. And so I outfitted my thesis to be in Unreal. So I was like rendering scenes in Maya, but I kind of popped them into Unreal and taught myself Unreal through that process. And I'm really glad I did that. Um, so later on in grad school, I volunteered at the Viz Industry Fair. And that's when I made my first contact with Playful Studios. They made Super Lucky's Tale, Creativerse. Um, and I I actually invited myself to their studio for to look around, like a um, not an interview, but kind of like a studio tour, because they're in Dallas and I am originally from Dallas. And so I went up there. Um, it ended up turning into an interview, and I was like, oh, this is cool, neat, like an actual game studio. Uh, it turns out that that didn't pan out at that time. And so I finished up my thesis, defended it, and then sent that work out to studios, and Playful actually ended up being one of those studios that I resent my work to. And my thesis being done, they really liked my work and gave me a job offer. So long story short, I graduated from A&M with my MFA and went to go work at Playful Studios, where I worked for 2 years as an environment artist, uh, which, because Playful Studios was like a smaller studio, we were under 100 people, an environment artist position was pretty broad. I did a lot of stuff. I made content, um, did the models, did the textures, set up the substance pipeline, all of that fun stuff. I did environment art. I set up levels and then lit them, and that's actually where I got really interested in lighting. And I kind of became their resident lighter because no one else wanted to do the lighting work. And I loved it, so I did it happily. But unfortunately, this January, actually, Playful had to lay off everyone. They went under, which honestly was hard. I was not expecting to be laid off of my first job, especially one that I enjoyed so much. But that happens, and it tends to happen a lot in the industry. And it used to be one of my biggest fears, but having gone through it, it taught me a lot about what I want out of my career. I kind of reassessed what I wanted out of the people I worked for, all that stuff. And it worked out because, funnily enough, the day after me and my coworkers were laid off, Gearbox Software was having a kind of like a "we're sorry you got laid off" event at a bar in Frisco, and so I went up there, not expecting much, because I was kind of sad and still reeling from the loss of my job. But while I was there, I was introduced to the lighting team, and they were all so nice, so cool. We aligned with everything that we loved, and we geeked out about lighting artists that we follow on ArtStation. We geeked out about like YouTube videos that we watched in school and all of this. And we ended up having like a 4-hour informal interview that night. And 2 weeks later, I get an offer from Gearbox to be a lighting artist, which is something that I had been wanting for a while anyway. I wanted to transition into lighting. So things work out, you work hard, you put yourself out there, it works out. So fast forward to me starting at Gearbox. I work there in person for a month, and then the whole COVID madness hit. And I've been working at home for 7 months, I guess now. And I have worked on 3 different projects at Gearbox so far. One has been shipped, Borderlands 3 DLC, Bounty of Blood. And I've contributed to 2 unannounced projects. So one that I'm currently working on is unannounced. I can't disclose anything, sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, that's the long and short journey of my life.
Wow, that's an amazing like story of how you had to switch it up at the last minute.
Yeah.
Then also whenever COVID hit, like all that must have been crazy for you as well.
Oh yeah, it's nuts because I barely got to meet my coworkers
Yeah.
in person, and now they're kind of just pixels on a screen, and I know their voice, but I haven't met them in person. So it's been interesting, but really rewarding, and I love working there or working here.
Do you think that other than the social aspect of it, your quality of like how much you can work and what you can work on is impacted heavily by COVID?
Actually, no. It does get lonely, and I do miss the face-to-face interactions, but it allows me to really dig in and focus on my work because there's not meetings interrupting my workflow, or like people wanting to go to lunch, or me going in late because I sleep in late, or any of that stuff. It's just, you know, a block of solid time at my desk at home where I can just really engage with what I'm doing. So it's surprisingly easy, and I've been really effective in this environment. I mean, besides the loneliness and stuff like that. But yeah.
Mhm. So I know that a lot of companies have kind of like seen how their numbers are being affected during COVID times and saying like,
Mhm.
oh, actually, we're getting a lot more productive. Do you think that Gearbox is going to go back to fully in person once COVID ends, or can you even talk about that?
Yeah, we've been talking about it internally, and I don't think I think we are going to go back fully eventually. But there are talks about uh, offering remote work to more candidates, kind of opening the job pool up a little bit, because now we've proven that remote work is effective and can work well. We can now reach out to people overseas, or in situations where they can't leave their families, or they can't get down to Texas, to Frisco. And that's going to be big for us, because we've had to turn away people in the past because of location.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah.
So just to backtrack a little bit, I was fully caught off guard when you said that you started SIGGRAPH and Chelinium, because they're
Yes.
such like they're so big mainstays at our school right now as far as like social clubs and activities go.
Yeah.
So I'm honored to be in your presence.
Oh, thank you. You
But
shouldn't, but
can you can you talk a little bit about how it was founding a club at A&M?
yeah, honestly, it starts as a small idea. So both times with SIGGRAPH and Selenium, me and my friends never knew it was going to evolve into what it is today. And I'm so proud to see like the state of both of them. Like y'all have done amazing with SIGGRAPH. I love like it's great. But yeah, at the beginning, it's just an idea. It's just we want to get involved. We want to bring people together. We want to bring these ideas to the students and just, I don't know, engage them on ways that schoolwork doesn't. Um, and so starting it was just a ton of fun, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know what was going to work, so we just kind of guessed. And there's a lot of guessing in the early years. And when something didn't work, we just didn't do it anymore. Or um, I don't know. We got people's opinions, and I don't know. It kind of played it by ear. Um, and then as things progressed and people got more involved and interested in what we were doing in both organizations, we kind of took a back seat, let people become president, vice president, kind of shift the leadership to new blood, and kind of let those ideas evolve the organizations more kind of naturally.
Hmm.
And it's been really rewarding. I don't know.
That's awesome. No, for
Yeah.
sure. All right.
Yeah.
So, one other thing you did while in your undergrad, just to bring it back to undergrad real quick,
Sure.
is the study abroad program.
Hmm.
And you went to Germany, right?
Yes, I did.
I know a lot of students that are current students have fears when it comes to like, oh, what am I going to do for my study abroad? So, can you tell me about how your experience was in Germany and
Mm.
maybe what some of your friends' experiences were doing other programs?
Yeah, definitely. So Germany by far is one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. And I look to my time in Germany as inspiration daily, like in my art, in my life. It it's a great decision. If you're on the fence, just do it. It's wonderful. Um, I actually went to Germany twice. I went as a student, and then in grad school I went as a student teacher. Um, so I was extremely lucky in being able to do that. And both times I stayed with the same host family. Um, and that was a really cool experience because my first time was 2012, my second time was 2015. And so I got to see the children in my host family grow up. Like there was kind of a jump. They were young kids in 2012, and they were preteens to teenagers in 2015. And it was a it was just great to be a part of like that family unit, and and call them my family, over time.
Hmm.
And they actually came to my wedding. They flew from Germany to come to my wedding, which meant a lot to me. But yeah, the actual experience was great. I think there's a level of independence that you can only feel when you're alone in a foreign country. There's something different about it. It kind of forces you to grow up a little bit. Um, and also just being around different cultures and like living in that space with different people um, just really teaches you about the world and like um, just the way other people live. And in terms of art, the inspiration is everywhere. Like it's gorgeous. Europe is gorgeous. I swear the lighting is different. I swear, like I would wake up in the morning and walk to the tram station, and like the light was softer and lighter. Can light be lighter? I'm not sure. um, but yeah, that was actually the inspiration of my MFA body of work. I did 3D scenes in Unreal based off of my memories in Germany. Um, and yeah, in order to inform that work, I actually used to keep a little walking journal on the way to my classes in the morning, where I would just write down like a play-by-play of what was happening around me, or how I felt, how things looked, or like what people were doing around me. And it was really neat to come back to the States and like read through those little living journals and kind of like relive moments. Um, and it was that journal actually that kind of informed my progress with my body of work, and it all kind of fed into each other. Um, but yeah, that's all to say, Germany is wonderful. Studying abroad is wonderful. I highly recommend it. Um, I know it's tempting to go do an internship, and yes, internships are great, but you can always work. You'll have your whole life to work. You'll have your whole life to like get a job, get an internship. You might have 5 internships before you know, get a job. But studying abroad is something that you can only really do when you're this age, and it's just so worth it. So I will always be a proponent for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the information on that.
Sure, yeah.
All right, so moving on. After you graduated from the MFA at A&M,
Mhm.
how did geography play a factor into your career choices? I know that there's a big pull to go to California because everything that's good is happening in California. But
Mhm.
I mean, you stayed in Texas, and
Mhm.
there's actually a lot of like a pretty good scene in Texas. So can you tell me about kind of the dichotomy between the games industry in California and in Texas?
Sure. Yeah, I personally wanted to stay in Texas um, because near the end of grad school, I was in contact with a lot of Texas studios through Chilenium.
Hmm.
And just being in grad school, like Viz is really good about getting people in to meet with students and talk to us. And so I had already made a connection with a bunch of these Texas studios, and I really appreciated what their goals were, their pace, um, their workload, the games they were making. It all just resonated with me. So by the time it came to actually start putting serious feelers out for jobs, I was kind of already locked into Texas, and I was in cahoots with Playful. I'd already had that first interview, and it felt right to me. But I had a ton of friends from undergrad and grad school that went to California. I have people in Seattle and New York, um, really all over the place, because Viz can really send you anywhere. Let me tell you. um, but it's really a personal preference. Um, the studios in California are larger. Um, they make all the glitzy, glamoury games that people like really want to work on. Uh, but in California, you do see a lot of crazier hours. It's more expensive. Uh, there's more of a crunch culture. Not to say there's not a crunch culture in Texas, in our studios, but it on the whole, on average, it seems to me that it's a little bit more fast paced in California, and that's totally fine. You just have to figure out what works best for you, because there are people that thrive in that sort of environment. Um, I just wasn't one of those people, so I decided to stay here. But my advice to you anyone listening, just figure out what works best for you and like what inspires you and gives you energy. Also, like if family is an important part of your life, it's totally okay to stay close to them. Like it's all about building your life the way that it will make you the happiest. But yeah, going back to the industry, the Texas games industry is absolutely exploding. The reason being is there's a lot of older game devs from the larger companies in California that have done 10, 15, 20 years at those studios, and they've kind of gotten burnt out, or they have a family and they want to start, they want to buy a house and like settle down, put down roots. And so they break off of those studios and come and start their own studios. So you have these like little independent studios popping up around Dallas and Austin, a little bit in Houston, and they grow into these bigger things. So yeah, Texas has the space to grow. It keeps growing. We're cheap. People like cheap. I like cheap. But yeah, I've only personally worked in the Dallas industry, so I can't really speak to like any of the other industries, but it's extremely close. Everyone knows each other because everyone's kind of incestuous up here. Like you work at id, you work at Gearbox, I worked at Playful, and we all kind of just like trade over time. And everyone's invited to each other's launch parties, and we all get together for drinks, do like monthly hangouts. It's a really great community, and everyone's supportive and wonderful, and I adore it.
That's
So,
amazing.
mhm,
For sure. All right, so moving into what you're doing in your current job,
mhm.
the primary tool you're using for lighting in games is Unreal Engine.
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell me kind of how like your day to day, like what you're doing in your job in Unreal Engine is?
Yeah. So day to day, like you said, we're working in Unreal Engine 4. Um, I believe Gearbox has been working in Unreal for a while now. Um, I did develop in Unity at Playful. I prefer Unreal Engine 4 for sure.
Unreal Engine is amazing. I love Unreal Engine 4.
Yes, and I know that's a huge fight, an ongoing fight between developers and artists. But as an artist, I love Unreal Engine 4. But yeah, day to day, let's see, how do I explain? So at Gearbox, we have different departments. So we have content art, we have level art, we have lighting, and then design, like mission design, uh, just level design. There's a bunch of different departments that all have their hands on, let's say, one level. So let's say a game has 20 levels.
Mhm.
Um, Gearbox will break all of our developers into pods um, that work on one level at a time. So you'll have your designer do a white box, like block out of intent for a level, pass it on to the level artist, who will then put 3D art that was made by the content department, uh, fit that into the white box and kind of work with the designer to build the look, of whatever level it is. When that level gets to a point that is representative of what it might be eventually, it's handed off to the lighting department, and that's where I come in. I go in and I do what we like to call vignettes, which are like small, bite-sized pieces of these monster levels, and I just do kind of like mood studies. I figure out how I want the viewer to feel in the space. I'm constantly talking with the level artist to get their input on how they think the player should feel in the space. I work with our internal tools to do like time of day stuff. So is it in bright daylight? Is it a spooky cemetery? Is it a radioactive rat's nest? I don't know. I'm just making that up. But that's kind of up to me to create lighting scenarios that fit in with the intent of the level. And we really just pass it back and forth like a hot potato until the end, when hopefully they give the lighting department like a solid 2 or 3 weeks to do all of our like optimizations and cleanup pass, which then the levels go into play testing and more optimization and all that fun stuff. But it's very collaborative. I'm constantly talking with my pod, designers, level artists, other lighting artists. It's really fun.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
No, I think it definitely did.
Okay.
With the lighting, how much of it is like purely like I am placing lights and tweaking lights, and how much of like fog effects or like how much of the cinematic aspect of it are you participating in? Are you like just doing lights?
That's a good question. At Gearbox, the fog and the atmosphere stuff, it is a part of our job as well. At other studios, like they might break that up into different departments. But yeah, like fog cards, fog balls, height fog, atmospheric fog, post-process volumes, all of that falls under me. It's really everything that goes into the final post-processed look of a scene, if that makes sense. So that also includes, of course, the lighting, static lighting, dynamic lighting, stationary lighting. We also do cinematics. So if your player walks into a boss arena and there's a cut scene that introduces the boss, we light those in Unreal Sequencer, which is gives you a little bit more fidelity over your lighting, because it's like pre-rendered, and you can turn lights on and off, and optimization isn't that big of a deal in those like small.
But at the end of the day, it's running in real time, right? In the person's game.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all real time. But that's not to say that we don't pre-compute some of our lighting. I'm not sure. Well, I'll pretend that no one knows anything about game lighting. In order to run in real time and not hiccup every frame, we have to optimize the scene, and that means we can't have real-time lighting for all of our lights. We have to pre-compute some of that light. It's called baking. So we bake static lights into a light map, which is like a 2D texture. That's basically just painting the light onto a texture and then mapping that to our objects in the scene. So all of that is like pre-computed, so it doesn't factor into like the efficiency of the scene. So my work is trying to figure out what needs to be baked down and what needs to be movable or dynamic. Because in a perfect world, you would want every light to be dynamic, because it gives you better shadows. It allows you to change the location of the light, the intensity, it gives you reflections. Like, all of like the fun, juicy stuff comes with like dynamic lighting. However, it's not realistic for everything to be dynamic, because it's just too expensive for the hardware that we're running on. So yeah, being a lighting artist is pretty technical. You have to be able to know what's enough and what is too much when it comes to the value of what you're putting into the scene, or the expense of what you're putting into the scene. So you're really kind of like balancing art and tech most of the time. And a lot of people don't realize that. I'd say that lighting is 40% art, 60% technical.
What percentage would you say of the tools you're using in Unreal are proprietary versus like out of the box?
Um, that's a good question. I need to talk to some of our engineers. We do have proprietary aspects to Unreal, but it's mainly just our own tools that we've outfitted to make our pipeline faster and easier for our artists and developers. It's nothing revolutionary. Like we haven't made our own engine or anything like that. We're still using a lot of Unreal's systems and like letting Unreal do most of the heavy work. It just kind of has a Gearbox flair to it.
So, kind of segueing to the next question about
Mhm.
like Unreal in general. First off, like where do you see Unreal in the industry right now? I know they're a huge company that's only getting bigger and more influential in different parts of the industry. So, can you give me kind of your take and your opinion on the state of Unreal Engine?
Yes, I would love to. I could talk about this forever, but I'll try and keep it brief and interrupt me if you'd like more explanation. But
Absolutely.
so I'll start by explaining the differences between like the film industry and the game industry, because I know in Viz there's a lot of people interested in both, and you might be asking like, where do I fit in? Like, what if I want to light for films? What if I want to light for games? Like, what do I do? I don't know. So historically, um, the gaming industry and the film industry have been separated by their visual fidelity. Uh, Films reached like a level of hyper realism way before games did, and even now, like games still tend to be more stylized, and that's because the film industry has had the benefit of using offline rendering and render farms, which lets them create these extremely realistic renders and simulations uh, because they can afford to let it cook for a long time. They can just press the button, let it cook until it's perfect, because they can like send it to the farms and all of that. I'm sure that you guys have dealt with render farms and long render times and stuff like that. But game engines, on the other hand, are real-time applications, and so they're doing a lot of these computations on the fly, and it's too taxing for existing game hardware, historically. And so because of that, like game engines haven't been a viable option for making films, because the bottom line was like they just didn't look as good. Like the engine just couldn't make realistic enough images. Um, but in recent years, Epic's the company that creates Unreal Engine. They've been absolutely killing it with their engine development, and it's become more and more possible to like get the level of film fidelity in real time. So that opens up a ton of possibilities for the film industry, for one. Because imagine like you're a film director and you're on set with your live actors, um, and you have a huge LED screen behind you with an Unreal scene, and you're filming your actors in front of this giant LED screen. Well, you can dynamically change the lighting scenarios. You can change props in the background on the fly. And if it's done effectively, which it's now starting to be done this way, it eliminates the need to be on location to film movies, which is totally nuts to me. Like instead of like having to wait for like the perfect twilight and like rushing all of your cameramen out to the desert to film perfect twilight in between like the hours of 6:15 and 6:45 or whatever, like you're able to do that on set in your studio. And I just think that's awesome. Like it's not my industry, but I think all of those advances are insane and really, really cool. um, and that's honestly one thing that attracted me to game development in the first place, was because I would be able to interact with the art I was making in real time. I didn't have to make like these small changes and then press a button and then just wait for it to render one frame. Like I was able to move around in the environment and see things in 3D and really engage and interact with what I was making. Okay. Also, let me, if you'll let me,
Sure.
I'm gonna geek out a little bit.
Please do. We have the time.
Okay, great. So I don't know if you guys are aware that Unreal Engine is coming out with, or Epic is coming out with Unreal Engine 5 next year.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we a few months ago, whenever the trailer dropped, I was just like jaw open watching
I,
the reveal video. It was insane.
it is truly a new world that we're about to enter into. Yeah, Unreal Engine 5 is going to be doing things that we've been wishing we could do for years in game dev. But for those who haven't seen the trailer, I recommend it. It's the Unreal 5 demo that they released it in May, and it basically just shows what they're all the cool stuff they're doing. But one of the things that I'm extremely excited about that's coming in Unreal 5 is the real-time global illumination.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know what global illumination is, it's essentially the simulation of how light bounces around in the real world. So in the real world, light doesn't just hit an object and disappear. Like each photon of light comes off a source and then bounces between objects thousands of times before it loses energy and dies. And then the culmination of those bounces is what gives every object in the environment color. And we call that global illumination. Global illumination is where you get like the light bleed of like objects into shadows. So I know that you guys have like seen an extremely bright color, let's say like a bright red car, and you have light that comes in and hits that car, and then that light bounces off and turns the shadow next to it or the wall next to it red. All of that is just because photons are bouncing around thousands of times inside of our environment, which is really cool. That's global illumination. But as you can imagine, realistic GI inside of a game engine requires a lot of powerful computing. And like I said before, like that computing previously was just too taxing on the hardware that we're using. And so the GI inside of Unreal Engine 4, it exists, but you have to bake it. It's static, and you only really get like, I don't know, 50 to 100 bounces, maybe, which I mean gives you the impression of GI, but it's not perfect. But in Unreal Engine 5, you get real-time GI, which means you can have one light. So let's say you have a sun, like the sun coming in through a hole in a cave, like in the demo. Mm-hmm. That one directional light will give you all of this bounce light for free. And when you change like the position of that light or the color or the intensity, that GI is going to change with it in real time, and it's going to give you like this sexy bounce lighting that previously we had to do by hand. And currently, like that's 80% of my job at Gearbox. I spend a lot of time faking bounce light so it looks like this beautiful GI when really it's just me, being tricky. Mm-hmm. So I'm extremely excited about that. And like I mentioned before, like if you haven't seen this Unreal demo, please do yourself a favor and go look at it, because it is unreal.
It's
Name drop.
absolutely insane. On the technical side of it, even though like these are amazing pieces of the industry that are coming together and making such quality art, how is that going to scale to a consumer hardware? This demo might be perfect, but are you going to need the beefiest SSD in the world that is proprietary knowledge that only the PS5 makers know?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, and I'm not an engineer, so
I'm not
I'm
either,
not entirely
sorry.
sure, but the PlayStation 5 is built to handle all of this, mm-hmm. all of these crazy new bells and whistles. Though I'm not sure how like backward compatibility is going to work. Like if someone develops a game with all these crazy bits and bobs, and then wants to, port it back to an older PlayStation, I'm not sure that's going to work.
Mhm.
But I don't know. That's a problem that I will gladly give to someone else.
Absolutely. And that's like the good thing about working in the industry is you don't have to solve every problem.
That's right.
Because I know, like, at least in undergrad, a lot of students like, man, I want to be a lighting artist. But that usually means you're, render wrangling for,
Hmm.
the whole night sometimes.
Right.
um, so yeah, with Unreal Engine 5, the gap between like film and games are closing. Do you think that
Mm.
a student who wants to be a lighting artist that thinks they want to do it for film should have Unreal in their pocket?
Yes. I truly, truly do, because everything is headed in that direction. Everyone wants to make art more efficiently and faster, with less time, and that's what Unreal Engine allows you to do. There's not going to be any more of those insane rendering times. You can make these changes in real time, or you can make changes to assets that are basically shippable assets, shippable scenarios in real time. So like a director, like I said before, um, can in previs can see what it's going to look like at the end, essentially, and kind of storyboard it out with, you know the look. uh, yeah, I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
but
like on the Mandalorian production.
exactly. And I do think, that visual fidelity, the gap in visual fidelity, is closing by the day. I mean, Unreal Engine 4 already has, um, real-time ray tracing,
Hmm.
uh, which ray tracing is what the film industry, it's the calculation the film industry uses to get the hyper realistic lighting and material reads. Um, and that's one of the things that the game industry was kind of chasing after for a long time. But now that we have real time ray tracing, like, damn, like, you can't really tell the difference in some scenarios between film and Unreal. So
Hmm.
yes, you should know it. Do you have to be an expert at it? No, especially if you're still wanting to go into films specifically. But it cannot hurt to just go in there, dig around, or even just read on the forums, um, watch some YouTube videos about like what it's doing, like how it's changing the industry. Just keep on top of it, because it's coming, and it's coming fast.
And honestly, in my experience, it's also like less of a headache to work with because you don't have to
Yeah,
wait for renders.
exactly.
So we have a segment of our podcast where we'll ask the members of our Discord to have any questions that they want to ask you directly. So Andrew Mahoney asks, "What should students who are planning on being lighting artists be doing right now to prepare for the industry?"
Uh, this is my favorite question, because there is a lot you can do, and you can start right now. But I'm going to tailor this question specifically to game lighting, because
Absolutely.
that's my professional experience. But um, if there are film lighters that are listening that have questions, and if I can dig up some answers for you later, I can certainly try. Just email me or something. But uh, so first, watch the Unreal Lighting Academy series on YouTube. Uh, they're created by a user named Daedalus, and he's my CG hero. I love him. I thought I saw him at GDC once, and I had a panic attack because I was so excited. It wasn't him, but whatever. But anyway, this series, is what got me into lighting in the very, very beginning. When I was transitioning my thesis over to Unreal, and I had no idea what real-time development looked like, or you know what Unreal could do at all. This is what taught me. And They're a few years old now, but they still give a pretty comprehensive overview of lighting principles, and a lot of that optimization stuff that I mentioned before. Um, and really, they're just invaluable. I've watched them 10 or 15 times at this point in my life, and I always go back. Um, Second, I'd make sure you have a good understanding of how to optimize game art. Um, and I know that that kind of sounds scary, because when I was going through Viz, I had no idea how to optimize anything. I didn't know why I needed to optimize. Um, but it's an important thing to know if you're going to go into games. I just suggest digging around on Google or YouTube and read in forums and just get a good understanding of how to optimize game art. Next, I would get an art station and I would look at it every single day. The only way you can make good art is to see good art, and ArtStation has like some extremely good stuff. Whenever I'm kind of having a mental block, or I'm not feeling creative, or I'm just feeling lazy, I'll go on ArtStation and just pick through things that inspire me, and it really kind of pulls me out. Oh, ArtStation is an online portfolio website for those who have never heard of it. But it's not solely for portfolios. It's kind of just like an art share site. Um,
It's a fun rabbit hole to go down.
oh, don't get me started. I've spent many hours on ArtStation. It's also a good chance to like find the artists that are most like you, or people that inspire you, or you can aspire to be. It's always good to have your art heroes, because people will ask you in interviews like, who do you look for inspiration? And if you don't have an answer, I mean, that kind of sucks. So ArtStation is a good way to find your art heroes. Next, I would say build your lighting portfolio. I've been through Viz and I realized that there's not a lot of support for lighting specifically. I don't know if it's changed now, but when I was going through, like, there are no classes for lighting. I had to teach myself. Um, and it was really just passion alone that made me kind of pursue that. But yeah, build your lighting portfolio, but don't overwhelm yourself by building out your own assets and scenes. I can't stress that enough, because it's really easy to discourage yourself when you feel like you have to build everything from the ground up. Just go into the Unreal Marketplace and download a pre-made environment or pre-made assets and just like throw together something. There's so much good content out there and it's just begging to be used. But yeah, go find some of that and then just relight the scenes and push yourself to light like one scene in several different scenarios. So when you're deciding to light different scenarios, think about what mood you're trying to convey. How would this dark alleyway look if it was a romantic dark alleyway? Or how would this bright alleyway look if it was a middle of a atomic bomb alleyway? Or just relight and relight quickly. Don't spend a lot of time doing it. Just go fast. Just spitball it. And finally, I made a little list here. I'm going down.
Absolutely.
Go outside and appreciate what you see. The real world is truly your biggest tool. Lighting is really scientific. So going outside and seeing how it interacts with objects, with you, with other lights is really invaluable. So I encourage you, like, next time you're outside, stop and look at your shadow and see what different colors are bouncing into it. Like, is the sky color bouncing into it? Is the stoplight down the street bouncing into it, and why? I do that all the time. I'll just walk outside and just look up at the sky and be like, what is this? But yeah, I'd say that'll get you started to being a lighting artist.
Do you think, like, kind of on that point, just as a fun aside, do you think
Yeah.
that your work and your experience as a lighter have made you think about the world in different ways, or like you can't watch movies without analyzing the lighting in the movies anymore?
Absolutely.
You think that's a good or a
100%.
bad thing?
It is a cross I must bear. And I'm sure all of you, or any artist really, feels that to some point. It's like the art is kind of ruined for you in a way because you're just analyzing it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's fun too. It's a puzzle.
So I know you kind of already gave some advice, but we always end off our show just because we're coming to the end of our time. We always end off our show with asking for two pieces of advice. One that's specifically related to your field, and then one that's like general life advice that you think might be important for, maybe you a few years ago when you were an undergrad to have heard.
Definitely. Um, for animation advice or CG advice, um, never stop making work. The biggest mistake I see with students is that they overanalyze their projects and only produce work that will go into their portfolio. And putting a ton of pressure on making one or two projects absolutely perfect isn't going to yield good results. And it definitely won't yield hireable traits. Um, because at the end of the day, you're just, digging yourself deeper into this hole of perfection, and you're not really seeing the full picture. Um, and portfolio work is important, but what's more important, at least my opinion, is to do quick, like multiple quick, like shitty studies and learn from them.
Mhm.
If you want to be a lighter, challenge yourself to relight a scene in 3 days and see what you come up with. Or if you're a content artist, just make one model in 3 days. Or if you're a concept artist, do several 30-minute speed paintings. And if you don't like what you end up creating, then just trash it and start something new. The worst case scenario is that you lose 3 days of work, but the reward is that you've learned more about your tools and honed your skills, and you know for next time like what you want to make, and you've prepared yourself to do something better. Um, so yes, don't ever stop making work, even if it's shitty.
Okay. Real quick on that note, do you
Yeah.
think that it's better for a student to do multiple small independent projects, like you said, or if they're working on a larger, like let's say a short film, do you think it's a trap, like to work on a short film for so long, and that they need to be doing independent separate projects, or could that yield good stuff as well?
Um, I support doing the big projects. I did a couple of those in my tenure at A&M as well.
Mhm.
Those projects are good because it teaches you how to work in a group, um, and that's going to be the rest of your life. That's the rest of your career, is working in a group. So those are very important. But it can be a trap, because if you're spending so much time pouring effort into making this perfect, or uh, helping other people pull their weight, or um, doing work that you don't really care about, but you have to do it in order for the project to survive.
Mhm.
All of that stuff, just be careful about it, because your work is your time is valuable, and you should spend your time doing stuff that you want to do, and what will benefit you. And that's what I mean by never stop making work. You should be really investigating what makes you happy, and what engages you or inspires you. And you can only do that by just trying things out, doing little mini projects. It is possible to find your passion and your place by doing these big projects, but in my experience, um, it sucks a lot of energy out of you if you let it.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys have felt that way, but at least that's how it played out in my experience. Um, so just balance it. You can do both, um, but just be careful. Just be aware of where you're spending your time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And then, do you
Life
have a
advice.
piece of general life advice?
Yes. My life advice is don't freak yourself out about finding the perfect job as soon as possible. I completely understand that fear because I went through it like not too long ago. There is a sense of dread and a weight of like leaving school and finding a job and making yourself feel like all of this was worth it. And normally the job proves that, you know. But you have to give yourself a break and remember that it doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't have to happen all at once. Not everyone lands their dream job after college, like right after college. Um, and I've noticed that the people that do land their dream job will lose motivation after a few years because there's nowhere else to go. And they'll end up kind of burning out or like trying something new or shifting 10 years into their career. I don't know, it's important to know that you should enjoy your personal journey and cut yourself some slack. And if you're not where you feel like you should be, that's okay, because you have nothing but time, and you just need to trust your skills and your own personal judgment about your life. And really, you can achieve anything you want. So,
Wow,
yes.
that's a very positive note to end on. But it's also like, it's really important information.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for coming and talking with us.
Of course.
For the people watching in between, or recently, we will have Anne come in the spring semester, hopefully, of our next year, so the spring of 21. Pending. But so she will be able to come and talk through Zoom, since we'll still be online.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, otherwise, I'm gonna do a few shill plugs here. We have our YouTube channel, which if you're watching this, you're probably already on. So make sure to subscribe to that. Um, and then we have our Discord. We'll put the link in the description below, as well as to our website, where you can check out all of our events. We have a ton of upcoming club events. We host socials, we host workshops, and we host industry meetups. So all of the ones in the current era of COVID will be online. But once we get back into it, we'll be back at TAMU's campus doing fun events in person. Thank you for listening, and thank you again so much, Anne, for coming and talking about your awesome expertise as a lighter in the gaming industry.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. So thank you everyone for coming, and goodbye.